A week before our divorce papers were signed, my daughter-in-law slept with my husband. I knew. I just didn't say anything. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to see how far they were willing to go. My name is Martha Johnson. I'm 64 years old. I've been married to Greg for 42 years. We built a life together in Savannah, Georgia. We raised a son, Lucas, who became the center of my world. And for decades, I believed I had a family worth protecting. But betrayal doesn't knock on your front door. It sneaks in through the side window wearing a smile. That day, when I walked into that law office and Greg's lawyer slid a document across the table that would leave me with almost nothing, I smiled. Because what came next? Nobody saw it coming. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, do me a favor, comment below where you're watching from. I want to know how far my story will travel, because this isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's ever been underestimated. People think marriages end with screaming matches and slammed doors. Ours ended with silence. It started small. Greg began staying later at the office, claimed he was swamped with new contracts. Some nights, he wouldn't even come home until after midnight. He always had an excuse, always had that same tired smile and the faint smell of cologne I didn't recognize. At first, I told myself it was stress. Men age differently. They get restless. But deep down, I knew. He had already left me. He just hadn't packed his bags yet. Lucas, our son, was the light in my life. At 35, he had a good job, a charming laugh, and a heart like his father's, at least the version of Greg I used to believe in. When he married Rachel 3 years ago, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. She was beautiful, smart, said all the right things. I cooked for her, gave her my grandmother's bracelet, and called her my daughter. But she never called me mom. Over time, their visits grew less frequent. Lucas was always busy. Rachel was always just getting over something. When they did come by, I noticed the way Rachel watched Greg, not like a daughter-in-law, but like a woman trying not to be caught wanting something she shouldn't. I remember once, during a Sunday lunch, she laughed at one of Greg's corny jokes. It wasn't the laugh that bothered me. It was the way her hand rested on his forearm. Too familiar, too easy. Still, I said nothing. Because when you've spent your whole life keeping a family together, you convince yourself that looking away is the same as keeping the peace. But peace built on denial is just quiet disaster waiting to happen. The day Samantha called, I was setting the dining table. It was one of those warm Georgia afternoons when the sun filters through the lace curtains just right. I was laying out the good china, something I hadn't done in months. Her voice on the phone was tight, anxious. "Martha," she said, "can we talk? Just us." Samantha is Rachel's older sister. We've always been polite to each other, but never close. So, when she asked to come over, I knew something was wrong. She arrived looking like she hadn't slept. Her makeup was smudged, and she held her purse like it was armor. I invited her in, poured us both tea, and offered her cucumber sandwiches. She didn't touch a thing. "Martha," she said, her hands trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something, and I'm sorry, I really am." My stomach tightened. She took a deep breath. "It's about Rachel. And Greg." I didn't speak. I didn't blink. She continued, "They're having an affair. I saw them, together, holding hands at a cafe near Greg's office. Kissing, acting like lovers." The words crashed into me like glass shattering, but I kept my face still, my voice steady. "Are you sure?" Samantha nodded, her eyes glistening. "I confronted Rachel. She didn't deny it." She laughed. "Said it was none of my business. Said you were old and boring. That once the divorce was final, she'd make sure you got nothing." I gripped the edge of the table. "She married Lucas to get close to Greg, to your family, to your money. She's been working on him for months." I stared at the flowers in the center of the table, the same centerpiece I used for Thanksgiving. Now it felt like a grave. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Samantha reached for my hand. "Because it's wrong. Because you deserve to know. And because Lucas, he deserves the truth. He doesn't deserve to live in a house built on lies." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't losing a family. I had already lost it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled, poured another cup of tea, and let Samantha's words settle like dust after an earthquake. Greg and Rachel thought they were clever sneaking around while I cooked Sunday dinners and ironed his shirts. They mistook my silence for ignorance. But silence when chosen is power. That evening, while Greg watched his usual news channel, I excused myself and stepped into my sewing room. From a drawer I hadn't opened in years, I pulled out a folder labeled Estate and Trust, Grandfather Ellis. Inside were documents my grandfather had prepared decades ago, papers most of the family had long forgotten. But I hadn't. I remembered how he warned me when Greg and I got married. "Martha," he said, "love with your whole heart, but protect your legacy." The trust he set up had strict rules. Any property linked to the family's inheritance, especially the house, could never be transferred to someone outside the bloodline. And if the marriage ended due to infidelity, the cheating spouse forfeited all rights. Greg had no idea. 2 days later, I scheduled an appointment with an attorney, not the firm Greg and I had used for years, but a woman named Patricia Lee. Young, sharp, no country club affiliations. She listened patiently as I told her everything: Rachel's betrayal, Samantha's confession, the subtle signs Greg had been giving away for months. After reviewing the trust, Patricia looked up with a small, knowing smile. "You're in a very strong legal position, Mrs. Johnson." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control return to my chest. I didn't need to confront them in the heat of betrayal. I didn't need to beg Greg to choose me, or expose Rachel in front of Lucas. What I needed was time. Some wars aren't won by charging in with swords raised. Some are won by letting your enemies think they've already won, then watching them crumble when the truth catches up. 3 days after my meeting with Patricia, Rachel showed up for our usual Sunday dinner. She walked into my kitchen like nothing had changed: designer dress, perfect curls, that bright smile she wore like a costume. "Martha, you look amazing," she said, wrapping her arms around me. She smelled like Greg's new cologne. "Thank you, dear. Lucas should be here soon. Would you like a glass of wine while we wait?" She perched herself at the kitchen island, legs crossed just so. I was actually hoping we could chat, just as girls. I poured her wine with a steady hand. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She leaned in, voice lowered in false concern. "I've been worried about you and Greg. You seem distant lately. Marriage can be so hard after so many years." I nodded thoughtfully. "We've had our rough patches." Her eyes lit up too quickly. "Have you considered counseling? Or maybe it's time to think about what would make you both truly happy." "You think we should divorce?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "I'm not saying that. I just think life's too short to stay in something that isn't fulfilling." I smiled and sipped my wine. "That's very thoughtful of you." Moments later, Lucas walked in, and Rachel transformed, laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm like it was instinct. But I watched her eyes. Every time Greg's car pulled into the driveway, she looked toward the door like she was waiting for someone she actually cared about. Dinner passed in polite conversation, but I heard the whispers when they thought I wasn't listening. "She suspects something," Rachel whispered. "She doesn't know anything," Greg replied. They were wrong. I knew everything. And I wasn't done pretending yet. The law office smelled like leather and money. Greg had chosen the firm Peterson Myers, known for handling high-asset divorces. He said it was just business, that we should keep it clean and civilized. Funny how suddenly he cared about being fair. Rachel came along too, of course. She sat beside Lucas, her hand resting on his knee, whispering to him like a concerned daughter-in-law. Lucas looked pale, confused, like a man trying to make sense of a puzzle with missing pieces. I sat across from Greg at the long mahogany table, directly across from Peterson himself, his longtime golf buddy. "We've drafted what we believe is an equitable agreement," Peterson began smoothly. He slid the folder to me. I opened it. Equitable. According to them, I'd get the old downtown condo we hadn't lived in for over a decade, a portion of our joint savings, a modest alimony payment. Greg would keep the family house, the vacation properties, the business, and the majority of the investment accounts. I didn't flinch. "This seems rather one-sided," I said politely, still scanning the pages. "Well," Peterson replied, "Greg has been the primary income provider, and the house requires maintenance that may be too burdensome at your age." Translation: They thought I was old, tired, and too stupid to fight. There are also some legal concerns regarding the trust documentation, he added, waving vaguely. It's best if Greg keeps the house for now just until it's sorted. I looked at Greg. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Rachel, on the other hand, looked like she could barely sit still, probably already picturing how she'd redecorate my kitchen. I closed the folder with a soft snap. Of course, I said, picking up the pen. Where do I sign? Silence. Even Rachel blinked in confusion. Mom, Lucas asked. Are you sure? Don't you want to think about it? I turned to my son with a warm smile. Sweetheart, sometimes the best thing we can do is accept what life brings us. And I signed. Not because I'd given up, but because I knew something they didn't. They were playing checkers, and I was playing chess. It was a Thursday afternoon when Lucas showed up on my porch, pale and shaking. I was tending to the roses when I heard his car. He sat inside for a long moment before finally stepping out, his face hollow like something had been ripped from him. Lucas, I called gently. He looked at me like a child again lost, wounded. Then, without a word, he collapsed onto the front steps. She lied to me, Mom, he whispered. Rachel, all this time she's been lying. I sat down beside him, not saying a word, waiting for him to find the strength. I saw the messages, he said, staring into nothing. Hundreds of them, her and Dad. They planned this. The affair, the divorce. She called me naive for ever thinking she loved me. My heart broke, but I kept my voice calm. How did you find out? Samantha, he said. She called me, told me where to look. I checked Rachel's phone while she was in the shower. And there it was, everything. He pulled out his phone, showing me screenshots, Rachel laughing, Greg reassuring her that I wouldn't be a problem, them talking about the house, the money. I threw her out, Lucas said quietly, told her she had 1 hour to pack. She just laughed, said it didn't matter, that she'd be living somewhere better soon. My house. She meant my house. He looked at me, pain swimming in his eyes. How are you so calm? He betrayed you too. I looked at my son, this boy I raised who had always believed in goodness. And I told him everything. About Samantha's warning, about the trust, about the lawyer, about why I smiled while signing those papers. Lucas stared at me, stunned. You knew? I knew, I said gently, and I waited, because sometimes the most powerful move is letting your enemies show their full hand. For the first time that day he smiled, not out of joy but out of recognition. He was no longer alone. Neither of us were. The storm came quietly. A week after Lucas discovered the truth, Rachel returned with Greg thinking she still had the upper hand. A small moving truck pulled into my driveway. Rachel stepped out, dressed in designer jeans and sunglasses too large for her face. Greg followed behind, shoulders tense, eyes darting. I watched them from the living room window, cup of tea in hand. Lucas was already waiting outside. Rachel approached the front steps like she owned them. We're here to collect some of Greg's things, she said sweetly, too sweet. Lucas didn't move. You're not welcome here. She blinked, confused. Excuse me. Greg cleared his throat. Lucas, let's not make this difficult. You made it difficult, Lucas snapped. You lied to me. You cheated with my father. And now you're standing on the porch of a house that doesn't belong to either of you. Greg looked at the movers, gesturing for them to wait. Rachel's smile cracked. This is our house now, Lucas. Your mother signed the papers. Samantha stepped out from the side yard, arms crossed. No, Rachel, you never read the fine print, did you? Rachel spun. You. I warned you, Samantha said, calm but firm, but you were too busy scheming. Lucas stepped forward. The house is part of a protected family trust. You can't touch it. And thanks to the evidence we turned over, the police are opening an investigation. Rachel's face went pale. Forgery. Fraud. And we haven't even gotten to the insurance policy you took out in my mother's name without her consent. She turned to Greg. You said this was handled. Greg looked helpless. For once, he had no words. Rachel's voice rose, desperate now. You can't do this to me. I gave up everything for this family. No, I said, stepping out onto the porch. You tried to take everything, and now you have nothing. Greg tried to speak. I stopped him with a look. You made your choices, now live with them. The movers packed their truck back up. And just like that, the curtain fell. Their plan, months in the making, had collapsed in the span of minutes. They didn't just lose a house. They lost their illusion of control. In the weeks that followed, the house felt different. Quieter, lighter, like it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Lucas stayed with me for a while. We cooked together, something we hadn't done since he was a teenager. He asked questions. He cried. He sat in silence. Healing isn't linear, it's a slow rebuild of trust, of belief, of self. And through it all, Samantha was there. She didn't force herself into the center, she just showed up, with takeout when we were too tired to cook, with fresh flowers on Wednesdays, with quiet words when the pain surfaced unexpectedly. I noticed the way Lucas looked at her, not with urgency or desire, but with recognition, like he was seeing her for the first time. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Lucas said softly, "Samantha's nothing like Rachel. She doesn't wear masks." I smiled. That's the difference between love and performance. One seeks to be seen. The other hides behind roles. He paused. Do you think it's too soon to feel something again? No, I told him. It's never too soon to recognize something real. I watched them that night from the porch as they talked in the driveway. The ease between them wasn't romantic yet, but it was genuine, and that's where real love always begins. As for me, I started transforming the condo Greg tried to toss at me in the divorce. It became a project, a small, warm place I named the Second Light. A refuge for women starting over after betrayal, after loss, after being told they weren't enough. Women like me. Women like so many of us. The truth is, the pain didn't disappear. But it made space for something else. Growth. Clarity. And the kind of peace that only comes when you stop begging to be chosen and choose yourself instead. People ask me if I regret not confronting Greg and Rachel sooner. If I wish I had screamed, thrown things, burned it all to the ground. But the truth is, no. I don't regret staying quiet long enough to see who they really were. I don't regret letting them dig their own graves with their lies. And I certainly don't regret reclaiming my dignity on my terms. I learned that betrayal doesn't break you. It reveals you. And it reveals everyone else, too. Greg showed me that comfort can rot into entitlement. Rachel showed me that charm without character is dangerous. And Lucas, he reminded me that the next generation still has a chance to do better. This wasn't the ending I imagined when I said I do 42 years ago. But sometimes the end of one story gives birth to another stronger, wiser, more honest. If you've made it this far, thank you. I don't take your time lightly. And if you're watching this with a heavy heart, wondering if you're strong enough to face your own truth, I promise you, you are. You don't need to explode to be powerful. Sometimes, the quietest woman in the room is the one planning the strongest comeback. If this story resonated with you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. This is Martha Johnson. And this was my story. But it might be yours too. Stay strong. Stay smart. And never, ever let anyone rewrite your worth.